Have you ever looked around and felt like everyone else was moving faster than you are? Maybe another business owner they just launched or hit a revenue milestone that you've been working really hard to achieve yourself. Maybe somebody launched a new program. They could have published a book or even landed a speaking opportunity or even announced a major achievement. Well, and then all of a sudden, despite all of the progress that you've been experiencing and the progress that you've been making, you find yourself feeling behind. Well, if you've ever experienced that, you are not alone. I have been there myself. In fact, what you are experiencing may not have anything to do with your actual progress. It may have everything to do with something that I call comparison bias, and sometimes I call it comparison trap. Now, comparison bias is that tendency to evaluate our success, evaluate our progress, and sometimes evaluate our own worth through the lens of somebody else's achievements rather than through our own reality. Now, the interesting thing is that comparison often doesn't feel harmful. Comparison feels productive. It can even feel motivating. It feels like we are just simply paying attention to what is possible for us. But over time, comparison can quietly distort how we actually see ourselves and see ourselves on our journey. And one of the biggest reasons for this is that we are rarely comparing complete stories. We are comparing our everyday reality, but we're comparing that to somebody else's highlight reel. We see the promotion that someone got, but what we don't see is we don't see all of those years of uncertainty that came before that promotion. We see that successful launch, but we don't see all of the failed attempts that came before it. We see the confidence in someone, but we don't see all of the moments of self-doubt that they had. And what we're often comparing ourselves to is not the full picture. It is only a snapshot. And snapshots, well, they can be incredibly misleading. I see this most of the time for women entrepreneurs and professionals in their business. Many are making meaningful progress. They are growing their businesses. They are leading successful teams. And they are also building something that is important. And yet they are struggling to feel successful. And why? Well, it's because their attention is fixed on someone else who appears to be further ahead than they are. Now, the problem is that comparison changes the questions that we are actually asking ourselves. So instead of asking the important question, how far have I come? When we're comparing ourselves, we are asking, how do I compare to that person? And those are very different questions that we ask ourselves. Now, the first one, well, that's going to create awareness on how far you've come. But the second one often creates dissatisfaction. Now, what makes comparison particularly challenging? Well, it disguises itself as self-improvement. We start to tell ourselves that we're learning from others. And you know what? Sometimes we actually are learning from somebody else. But there is a difference between inspiration and comparison. Because inspiration asks you a different question. Inspiration is going to say, that's possible for me too. Where comparison says, why am I not there yet? Of course, one will expand possibility, and that other one, it's going to diminish your progress. And when comparison becomes a habit, it begins influencing our decisions. We start chasing goals because they look impressive. We will start adopting strategies because they're working for somebody else. And then we start to measure success using standards that we have never consciously chosen ourselves. And without even realizing it, we have begun drifting away from our own values, from our own priorities, and even our own purpose. And this is one of the reasons I talk about this, and I call it the alignment gap. Now, the alignment gap is that space between where we are and where we could be if our decisions were driven by clarity rather than driven by our unconscious patterns. Now, comparison bias is one of those patterns. Because when we're constantly looking sideways, it is so difficult to move forward and to move forward with confidence. Now, I understand this personally. There have been seasons in my own life and in my own business where I have looked around and felt as though everyone else was moving forward faster than I was. And in those moments, I found it surprisingly easy to overlook my own growth. I was so focused on what someone else had achieved that I stopped even recognizing what I was accomplishing and how far I had come. What eventually shifted for me was learning to reconnect with my own definition of success. I stopped measuring my progress against somebody else's timeline. What I did is I started paying more attention to my own values, to my own purpose, and also paying attention to the impact that I wanted to create. And the more I did that, the less power comparison had over my thinking. Now, that doesn't mean that comparison is going to disappear. Well, we are human, and it's always going to be evident for us to compare ourselves to others. It will always show up from time to time. But here's the difference. The difference is that once you become aware of comparison, you can stop accepting its conclusions as being the truth in your life and in your business. You can pause and you can ask, am I looking at this for inspiration, or am I measuring it against my own worth? Am I learning from somebody else's journey, or am I using it to diminish my own? Now, those questions, they are going to create that awareness. And awareness is going to help you, and it's going to create some choices in your life. Now, if there's one thing I want you to remember from this video, I want you to remember this. Someone else's success is not evidence of your failure. Your journey was never meant to look exactly like theirs. And your timeline, well, it's going to be different because your circumstances are different. Your purpose is different. And your path will also be different as well. And the moment that you stop measuring yourself against somebody else's chapter and season in life is often the moment that you will begin appreciating your own journey. Because sometimes the greatest obstacle to seeing how far you have come is spending too much time looking at somebody else's who is standing right in front of you.